Good morning. I'd like to start with an apology. I will be chewing gum during my talk this morning. Anybody else go to Chris Tomlin last night? Yeah, I was screaming like a banshee, which in retrospect was probably a poor choice, but so bear with a little hoarseness. I'm very privileged to be able to share this morning with Kevin. I had not gotten a chance to meet Kevin until a couple weeks ago, and since then had a couple conversations with him, and very excited that he's here and very encouraged by the person he is and the things that we've talked about. So it's a privilege to be able to share with him this morning, and I would like to remind everybody that as he mentioned, the children are our future. So please keep him in your prayers as he's getting his ministry up and off the ground, because it's another service ministry like all the rest. So remember him in your prayers. We have a lot of students coming up, and they're in a time in their life that they could use a lot of prayers. So. As Dennis mentioned, I recently participated in my first Kairos weekend. I'd always heard a lot about Kairos and their need for cookies, and I know the church has always been very good about supporting us with prayer and cookies and with finances. And of all the times I ever heard about it, I don't know that I ever heard a follow-up of whatever happens or how it goes or any follow-through on it. So Dennis gave me an opportunity to share with you a little bit about what I experienced on my first weekend with it, so I kind of jumped at the chance. It's a ministry full of miracles, I'll tell you that. I think two of the biggest miracles were I made it 4 days without Mountain Dew, and Dennis and Grace gave me a microphone, so I think that's two miracles right there. But as Dennis mentioned, it's a Christian ministry, and it's where we go in and we share Christ to prisoners. And it's a 4-day weekend, about 40 hours, very intensive, very structured, but very loving. The residents, they call them residents, it's their house, so they're grouped into tables, and each table's given a name like Paul, Matthew, Peter, and at that table there's Kairos volunteers, there's the residents, and there's a chaplain. And you sit every other person, so you have a chance to have the conversations and prayers and talking, and they're free to at any point to go out and speak to a chaplain if they have a question or a decision or whatever. So it's very structured, but it's really neat to witness. I was actually what they call a servant, so I had the Paul table, and we bring the guys food and drinks, and just as much as they want, whenever they want it. We learn what they like and have it made for them ahead of time, and they've never had anybody serve them before. They've never been loved before. So the fact of just taking them a drink and knowing that you like this much lemonade and this much iced tea, they're thrilled. So I was a servant, and it was neat because you could watch everything happening kind of from a distance a little bit. This is where the cookies come in. I never really understood the whole cookie thing, but those guys eat cookies like you wouldn't believe, because in prison, the food's very bland. They said they get food, but there's just no flavor to it because they can't use anything anyone's allergic to. They can't use anything that has a religious connotation. They're supposed to back down on salt and that sort of thing. So the food's very bland. So to get cookies or fruit for them is just an incredible experience. So they plow through them. I think we went through 2,000 dozen cookies that weekend. But the cookies, it's unlimited. They can have as much as they want, which is to kind of represent God's unending love. There's as much as you can take, He will give you, and they're very sweet. His love is sweet, like the sweetness of the cookie. Full of flavor and just life changing to these guys. And it's interesting that the staff loves to have us come in, because the prison's on good behavior for about 3 weeks before we get there, because we take cookies out into the blocks and serve everyone. The blocks are set up in kind of they're almost a V shape with 12 cells on a side, upper and lower. So there's 12, 24, 40, 48 cells in a block with a gate at the end that the guards can look in. And the blocks will just practically sit with their hands folded the weeks before we get there, because they don't want to miss the opportunity to get cookies, because if they're on bad behavior, they don't get cookies in their block. So it's real interesting. The guys almost fight over who gets the cookies, but we go in and take the cookies, and it's just a real unique opportunity to go in and see how they live and what they experience. They have laundry facilities, showers, ice machines, and they're in there. They're locked in their cell 22 hours a day. There's one person per cell, and they get out for an hour to have free time in their block to do laundry or take a shower or whatever they need to do, and then they get 1 hour for what they call it rec time, and they can go outside. They're not allowed to have any workout facilities or anything that they could use as a weapon, so they can either walk around a track or they can take a basketball. So, that opportunity to get out for them is a pretty big opportunity. So one thing you know about me is I like to ask a lot of questions. So we were at the Toledo Correctional Facility. That's what our Kairos team, there's a Kairos team. A lot of the prisons have their own Kairos team. There's about 36 states that have Kairos ministries. We're Toledo Correctional. So this is a level 4 prison now. It used to be level 2, then went up to 3, now it's up to level 4. And the way the Ohio system works is there's 5 levels, 1 through 5. So 1 would probably be like the Perrysburg downtown jail. And 5 is where prisoners were locked up 24 hours a day, fully restrained, and if they're let out of their cell for anything like medical, they either have to be in a cage or in full shackles. So we're 1 level below full restraint. If that gives you an idea of the kind of people we're dealing with. There's currently about 800 people in Toledo Correctional. Like I say, there's 1 resident per cell, 22 hours a day locked up. These guys, from talking to them, they really feel abandoned because once they go in there, essentially none of their family or friends ever talk to them ever again. And if they do, it lasts about a month, and then they're forgotten. So they're very lonely, very isolated, kind of longing for companionship, and they've never seen love. It's real interesting. These guys are level 4 felons, but in the past, when it was a level 2, level 3 facility, I was talking to the guards. They said that they'd have about a fight every 2 weeks that they would have to break up. They said now that they've gone to level 4, they're actually breaking up about 5 a week. So it's about a 10x increase in the number of fights that they have. But what's really interesting is that place is immaculate. You could eat off the floor in there. These guys, even though they like to fight all the time, they are meticulous cleaners. There's all the books in their cells are lined up. Their beds are made. There's nothing out of place. If they're let out for work release, like to clean the floors or do laundry, they get on their hands and knees and scrub the floors. So it's a real interesting, psychological dynamic that they like to fight, but they love to clean. So it's just real interesting to watch the whole thing. So I was part of Toledo Correctional, Kairos number 30. So the first time they had one was in 2003, and they do 2 a year. So that was 15 years to a year. We're number 30. I should have done it years ago, to be honest with you. This was my first one, but should have done it. I always felt like, I don't know if anybody ever heard the old Scott Wesley Brown song, "Please Don't Send Me to Africa." I kind of felt like that, where I felt the Lord was prompting me to do something, but I just kept procrastinating, thinking, no, I'll sit in my pew and I'll sing the songs and I'll cry over the touching stuff and maybe clean the floor, but don't send me someplace I'm not comfortable. But that's what he was, prompting me to do. So what do? I ask a lot of questions. What's the other thing I do all the time? Do a lot of research. So, I started researching, prison and ministries and what the Bible had to say about it. So I want to share a few verses with you. Psalm 69:33, it says, "The Lord hears the needy and does not despise his prisoners." A little later, Psalm 146:7 says, "He upholds the cause of the oppressed, and he gives food to the hungry. The Lord sets his prisoners free." Hebrews 13:3 says, "Remember the prisoners as if you are chained with them, and those who are mistreated, since you yourselves are part of the same body also." And then probably the one that everybody's heard the most is Matthew 25:36, and I'll read 25:36 through 40, but it says, "I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous answered him and said, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you as a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothed you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king replied, "I tell you the truth, whenever you did one of these for the least of my brothers and sisters, you did for me." So, really started convicting me that I should participate in this ministry. So I did some praying and some thinking. So finally I kind of reconciled with God that, okay, well, if you want me to do this, then you need somebody to come ask me to participate. So 2 weeks later, here comes Phil Darling. He says, "Hey, Jay, is Phil in here?" I don't think so. He says, "Jay," he goes, you need to participate in Kairos." And I thought, yes, that wasn't a question. That was a statement, But, so I tried to procrastinate again, but I couldn't. I decided to participate in it, and probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. Just ironically, it's all coincided with our men's Bible study of James, which chapter 2. Read it when you get home. It'll tell you a lot. But so I went in, did the weekend like Dennis said about a month ago. Since then, a lot of people come up and say, "Great job, Jay. Glad you went. Good job, this, that, and the other." I want to tell you right now, I appreciate the encouragement. Man, it's not me. It was all God. I'm just the feet on the ground. everything was him. He orchestrated everything. The volunteers, the staff, the residents. It's interesting. These guys, they have to volunteer into the program. They apply for it, and then the chaplains and the wardens pick who gets to participate. So we had one guy in. There's 24 of them that came in this weekend. Of the ones that were in there, one guy applied 2 months ago. One guy applied 14 years ago. So it's not first come, first serve. It's when the Lord places on the hearts of the people making the decision who comes in when they come in. So, everything was orchestrated by God. So, again, I appreciate the encouragement, but, my works are really just an outward expression of my faith. And this is another thing I became passionate about through this ministry is that, we need to be willing to live out our faith. And so, again, what I do, dive in, do some research. So, Matthew 5:16 says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." And that's what this is. This is a bunch of guys that are just in there to love people so that God can be glorified. That's what ministry is. James 2:14. When you get home, read James 2. It's worth it. It says, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such a faith save them?" Then 2:17 says, "In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by actions, is dead. But someone will say, 'You have faith and I have deeds. But show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds.'" And then James 26 says, "As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead." So, I just want to implore you, works don't save you, but when the Spirit's leading you to do something, you need to follow his prompting and express your faith through your love, through action. Having a lot of biblical information in your head and not living it out is useless. So, we need to have faith with surrender, and true faith will bring a life full of good works, and showing your faith through your good works because of the Holy Spirit in you. That's what we've been talking about, like faith bit. That's what we've been talking about. So, I was called to this ministry. I'm not special. I didn't do anything other than just, be obedient. And I really challenge you. There's a lot of ministries that can do a lot of good that need a lot of people, to do it. So, I just pray and seek and just see if the Lord's prompting you to participate in a service ministry. Because, I'm telling you, it changed my life. It changed my perspective on I was blessed. I'll probably cry during the talk. I'll try not to. But, it's so emotional to be with these guys. You really have a peace in your spirit when you submit to your calling, and it just causes a revival in your heart, and that just changes your perspective on everything. You stop judging people based on their looks or their circumstances. We're all children of the King. Those guys are no better or worse than me. We just had a little different upbringing. They needed to hear the same truth I needed to hear. We just heard it a different way. So, it's amazing to see their lives changed. We always talk about planting the seed, and I know in my life, I'll witness to friends and family, and you say you plant that seed and you hope it'll grow. I'm telling you, in 4 days, it was like planting seeds on steroids. You planted them and they grew, and you saw it in 4 days. I've never seen anything like it. It's just amazing to see how God uses people. One of the most amazing things is about half our team that went in, the Kairos team, about half of them are ex-convicts. Three of the ministers are convicts. They got saved in prison, got out, and went into the ministry, and they're preaching in churches now because the Lord touched their heart and changed them. And that's what it's about. Just the way God uses people is just a great reminder for me. It strengthened my prayer life. I've prayed for these guys every day since I've been out. It just reminds you how important prayer is and the difference it can make. And honestly, I no longer worry about petty things. We don't have problems. Compared to what we heard, we just don't have problems. You should hear some of their stories. Now, a lot of you know that I like to ask a lot of questions. I like to do a lot of research. I also like to tell some stories. These guys tell some stories. And I'll try not to cry, but you wouldn't believe some of the things they've been through. We have these conversations around the table. We're not allowed to ask them what they're in for, but if they want to say anything to us, we can listen. Every single one of them I talked to, all 24 of them came up and said, "I deserve to be here. I was living the wrong kind of life. I was sinning. I was evil. I deserve to be here." Every single one. Not a single one of them said they were innocent. They said, "I deserve what I got." The stories will blow you right. There's a guy in there. He was a member of a gang. A lot of abuse, a lot of drugs, a lot of violence. This one particular individual was a member of a gang, and somebody had done him wrong. So he went over to their house. The guy comes out of the house. He pulls out a gun, shoots him in the head, dead right in the front yard, right in front of his wife and his mother. gets caught, gets put in jail. About a month after he got put into jail, the wife and the mother brought him a home-cooked meal, sat down with him and said, Jesus loves you, we love you, we forgive you. They came in every month that he was in prison and brought him a home-cooked meal and told him that they loved him. They sent him letters every week, and he came to know Christ in jail because of his victim's family. He's now in there. The only reason he wanted to be in the program, he's an older gentleman, is to tell all the young guys that they're living wrong and that this is not the path they need to be on. He said he wanted them to know that there's somebody in there that understands them and supports them, and they can come to him anytime for prayer. He only wanted to be there for the other 23 guys to tell them he support them. But he was saved from his victim's family. Another guy in there, there's a lot of gangs in prison. There's Crips and Bloods and white supremacists, and there's Asian gangs and Russian gangs, and they're all kind of jockeying for position. There was a white supremacist that came to the group. Walked in the first day, on the back of his head, bald head, it says Hitler, SS, swastika, and KKK, right down the back of his bald head. Came in, and I mean, it's mixed race in there. There's a little bit of everything in this group, and he was very uncomfortable. You could tell him Thursday night he was not at all comfortable with the surroundings, being around people that weren't like him. So we go through the process of the weekend, and it's very structured. There's these talks, about a dozen talks that cover different topics, and everything's voluntary. These guys don't have to do anything they don't want to do, but they all volunteer to participate. At least all of them did this time. And after the talks, the table sits down. So like my Paul table would sit down, the 6 residents and the Kairos guys, 9 total, and they make a poster. And then they present the poster to the group. And when they introduce it, they give their name. One guy takes a turn each time presenting a poster. So he'll give his name. He'll say what weekend this is and what table he's from. So for instance, I'd get up and I'd say, I'm Jay Brooks, TOCI, Kairos number 30, table of Paul. Here's my testimony. And so they'll present these posters. Well, this white supremacist, by I think it was Friday night or Saturday morning, he had already accepted Christ. He had such a moving experience. He'd gone off separately with one of the pastors and prayed with them and received Christ. And he came in a changed man. And that's what I'm saying. It is amazing. You can't believe the changes. And I don't think you can fake it. I mean, God was truly moving with these men. He comes in. We have a presentation. They do a poster. And an African-American guy from his table gets up, introduces himself, gives the summary of the poster, gives a little personal testimony, starts to walk away from the podium. This white supremacist gets up and just hugs him and says, man, I love you, brother. He says, you touched me. He goes, your word spoke to me. He goes, I love you. He goes, I am your brother. If you are ever in the yard and somebody messes with you, you come get me. You're my brother. I got your back. And they're hugging each other, crying. And I'm watching this guy with KKK and a swastika on the back of his head, hugging an African-American, telling him he loves him. I got your back. I mean, it was miracles happening all weekend long. There's guys in there that have been in for, they're in for life because of things they've done. They grew up, their dad left them, their mom was drunk, and one guy, his uncle, started raping him at 5 years old, and so he joined a gang. They see hate as love, which didn't make sense to me at first till they explained it. But these guys come from this rough upbringing. No one cares about them. They're being abused. They're unloved. They've never known love. They're just a real tough circumstance. And all of a sudden, this group of guys comes up and says, "Hey, come hang with us. We'll watch out for you." And they're held together by a bond for hating another gang. But they'll get together and they'll support each other. And they saw that hate for another gang as love amongst themselves. And it wasn't until this weekend of us going in there and serving them that they saw what love was supposed to look like. They'll tell you, we've never seen love. We thought hate was love. This guy, he ended up accepting Christ. And I said, wow, that's amazing. I said, so what's going to change for you when you get back out to your gang? He says, we have a beat-out gang. And I said, I don't know what that means. And he says, well, if we say we want to leave the gang, he says, because obviously I'm not living like that anymore. I can't run with those guys. He says, I have to tell them I want to leave. And he says, one day when I'm not expecting it, that gang will catch me out in the yard, and they'll start beating on me until the guards break it up. And if I survive the beating, I can leave. He says, but if I don't survive, then that's the chance I'm taking. I said, so you're willing to make this decision knowing that you're literally have the chance to get beaten to death? He said, oh, absolutely. He goes, because now I know somebody loves me and I know where I'm going. So I told this story first service, and Phil Darling, who's in it with me, he came back. He says, did you hear what happened? I said, no. He says, there's an update on that guy. And I said, what happened? He said, 2 weeks ago they caught him in the yard and they beat him. I said, what happened? He said, he's in critical condition, but he lived. And the first thing he says is, thank God I made it. So he got beaten and he lived. But he was willing to do it, and he's still preaching to the other cellmates in his block about what he learned over the weekend. I'm trying not to get emotional on you. But you just hear these stories after stories. They just seek goodness and beauty. The guys, when we have meals for them, we'll have children paint placemats for them. With rainbows and unicorns, butterflies, whatever. These guys will start tucking them in their shirts because they say we want them back in our cells so we have something beautiful to look at, because all we see are brick walls. They will literally hoard hand-colored placemats because they're seeking beauty so strongly. These are level 4 felons, and they want a picture of a unicorn. It's amazing to me. But the stories, like the older guy who's there and just helped the young guys. The stories from the outside. There's a gentleman who, I think it was the first night actually. He was so moved by what was going on that he accepted Christ. He went off, prayed with one of the chaplains, and came back in. He was just a changed man. And he ended up making a phone call to his mom, and he says, Mom, I'm so excited. I just got to tell you, I accepted Christ. And she started bawling. She says, I've been praying for you for 14 years. And she says, I can't believe you finally accepted Christ. And so he just really wanted to tell her. Well, Sunday morning, I guess he talked to her again, and she had gone in. The minute she hung up the phone, she went and she quit her job. She broke up with her boyfriend. She packed up her apartment, got in her car, and drove to Florida. Moved in with her sister in Gainesville, Florida. Went to her sister's church, met with her brother-in-law, set up a men's group for this guy to go to, set up a job for this guy to have. And she moved because she says, I don't want my son coming back to Dayton to run around with the guys that got him there in the first place. So his mom literally gave up everything she knew to move to Florida so he'd have a place to go and not get in the same situation. And you hear these stories and you think, oh my gosh, They get, we write each of them a letter. So in the course of the weekend, there was 30 of Kairos team, 30 members on the team. So each resident gets 30 letters, and they'll cry over them. It's really touching. It's hard. I don't think I've ever cried so much in my life. It's just, and what's interesting is there's Kairos there's 9 countries that have Kairos ministries in 36 states, and they can send messages to these guys. So we'll take in the board where everybody signed up for half-hour prayer times, and they can read who's praying for them at certain times, and they'll say, I got saved here. I knew who was praying for me. And then the other Kairos ministries, they'll send emails, encouragement. We got one from Brazil that said, we know what you're going through. We're praying for you. Kairos, Rio de Janeiro, whatever. And we'll get them from Arizona, California, New Mexico, wherever. Even the women's Kairos ministries were sending emails saying, we're praying for you too. The outpouring of love these guys see is overwhelming. It overwhelmed me. When we try to do some things inside that are really moving too. We have a prayer circle where they each go around and pray for each other. We have a forgiveness ceremony where everybody, including the Kairos team, they'll get up and they'll write on a piece of rice paper. You write down everyone that you need to forgive, and you write down everyone that needs to forgive you. And some people, it's only a couple names, and some of them look like they wrote an encyclopedia on there. And you go up, and 3 of the ministers get in a line. You go up to the first one, and you hand them your paper, and they'll lay hands on you and pray for you, and they'll drop the paper in a bowl of water and stir it, and the rice paper dissolves. And so you let go of that, forgiveness that you need. Then you go to the next minister and you hold out your hands and they'll wash your hands while they're praying over you. And then you go to the third one, they'll dry your hands while they're praying over you. And it completes the cycle. These guys will literally break down, shaking and crying, and fall to their knees during that ceremony. I've never seen anything like it. It's really touching. I'm sorry. So anyway, then they, so over the course of the weekend, you get really attached to them. It's very emotional. And then they have a closing ceremony. Well, these guys don't know what's going to happen on the closing ceremony. They think that it's going to be like every other day where we give a talk and they get up and give their poster. But in reality, what we do is we take them down to the gym, and we have about 150 outside people come in. So, we'll have people from the church, we'll have our families come in. Anyone who's been through Kairos before, you can only go through once in your lifetime. But if you're an alumni, you can come to the closing ceremony. So they'll walk in, and there's 200 people who give them a standing ovation as they walk in, and they just break down crying. So then they'll get there in front of all those people, and voluntarily, they'll get up and they'll say, I'm Jay Brooks, TOCI Kairos number 30, Table of Paul. Here's what happened to me this weekend. And everyone in the place is bawling. It is so touching the way God works through these men, and then how they also touch the people on the outside. Of the 24 guys that came through the program the weekend I was there, all 24 of them claimed to have made a decision for Christ, and I bet at least 20 of them were legitimate. I mean, their demeanor, their behavior, everything about them changed. I mean, it was a visible change in their lives. And of any of those guys I met that weekend, if they got out tomorrow, I'd welcome them into my house. You get so bound to them, and they are. It's so emotional. We never felt in danger there, because if anything ever started, those guys would form a wall between us because they get that close to us, because we're so meaningful. So their life changes were so obvious that I wouldn't be at all afraid to have them in my house tomorrow. It changed me. I highly recommend it. It's not, a lot of you, you think you bake 24 cookies, but in reality, you change 24 lives. And I appreciate your support, and I just ask that you please continue to pray for these people. It is amazing the work as God is doing, and it's amazing how He's using people. I mean, if He can use me, He can use any one of you. So I appreciate this opportunity to share, but amazing weekend, and your prayers, you wouldn't believe the way your prayers get answered there. So thank you.